What's up, everybody? The Duke London podcast. I believe we're episode 24. I'm just going to check because I can't keep track at the moment. I'm just doing so many podcasts. I'm just crazy like them, just doing podcast after podcast after podcast. This will be episode 25. Woo, baby! Episode 25 of the Duke London podcast. I feel like that's a big number, although it's not that big, but 25 is quite a lot for me, especially when I think back to the fact that when I had never done it. I'm with Saskia Horton today.
Love that.
Yeah, Saskia, you are a wonderful person, and I'm glad to have you here. We actually spoke about the podcast like way before I ever did it.
I wondered if you were going to mention
Yeah,
this.
yeah. We
Oh man.
because we had a workshop for artists, and part of it was to come up with an idea that we had to work on a pitch for, and to practice pitching. And then we did our pitch on the a dance scene podcast, which is cool. I think it wasn't, I don't know about you, but I mean we had 15 minutes to come up with it.
Yeah, it was one of those ridiculous timed tasks where you're just
yeah.
what do I do?
What do I say? Yeah, but I think we didn't. I didn't see it as this type of thing. I was thinking of getting a venue and stay, having one set up, and it's with the backdrop, and not what I'm ended up doing now is taking my mics everywhere and just being a little podcast nomad and going to different studios and stuff.
Well, I think we called it the archive or something.
Oh yeah, did we have a name?
Yeah, we had
Sick.
bruv, it was a full on pitch thing, wasn't it? We wanted to sound proper certy and professional. Okay, it's called the archive.
Yeah. We didn't win the pitch though, did we?
No, I don't think we did. But still, I think it was great. It was more so I think it was more really hip hop dance focused and the scene and
True.
Archiving different people, different people who represent different styles and stuff like that. But
Yeah,
I
true.
know it was sick actually, because even then I felt like you were kind of gassed about the idea of podcasting, and I could see it, I could feel it in yourself, in your eyes, in your energy. And I was like, this guy, he's gonna take it serious.
It's this isn't just a fun idea.
When was it? A year ago? No,
More than a year ago, I think.
Really?
When were we? I don't know. I'd have to check, but it was a while ago. Yeah,
I think it wasn't 2019.
it might be. Yeah,
I think
at
so.
some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I've always wanted to do something like this. I didn't know that it was podcasting, but I went through all the sorts of thinking I wanted to do writing or event reviews or some sort of social media coverage or something. Just I guess more on the media side of these things. But yeah, ended up with the podcast, which is I'm
dope.
enjoying. Yeah,
It's dope.
Which is the jury's still out, which is it's something for now. But no, yeah, that was cool. That's always a nice link. I'm happy to have you here as a full circle kind of thing. Tell me a bit about you. What have you got going on? Because I know you obviously from the dance scene, but I also know you do music. I know you're a multi-talented kind of person. So tell me about you. Tell me about yourself.
Well, I think the term that I most like to go with when people ask me what do you do, and you have to answer in a sentence, is I'm a multidisciplinary artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the simplest way. And then some people still what's that? Okay, I work across dance, I work across music. I write a lot, but that's not something that I really share at all.
Okay. Well, you just did, but
I just did. But yeah, no, but
no, you don't put it out. You mean?
Well, I feel I have to now, because basically one thing that I've been working on recently, literally right now, I'm working with Cy. Do you know Cy Rawlinson?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a G. He's from Leicester. He's got a commission to create a 40-minute work in progress.
Whoa.
Which
okay.
Basically, he was commissioned by a theatre, a play theatre. So I think they think that's a work in progress, but they don't realise.
Yeah, it's to get to 40 minutes. That's
to dance for 40 minutes in a bit, basically. But anyway, how he's done it is really clever. So he's done a lot of writing, or he's gotten us as the dancers, myself and this guy called Helder from Leicester as well.
Yeah.
To do so much writing. So basically, the show is probably 60% text.
Oh wow.
And our text as well. So
as in speaking it.
speaking, recording, spoken word and also just like what's that called? Free writing.
Oh, nice.
And so I feel like I'm about to go on stage and dance for 40 minutes to my own writing.
Oh, wow.
So I can't now just like say I don't write.
What do you mean specifically by writing?
By writing, I mean, okay, it's weird because I've never had to categorize it because it's something that's been so personal for so long, but like it's legit, like from 7 years old. I think it was probably before dance or music. I used to like avidly read like poetry books.
Oh, wow. Oh, no, that's nice though.
Like really,
yeah.
Like, I don't know, I just found some like old dusty book just with like sonnets or like kids' poems in it, and I just used to giggle and read them and like love how it rhymed. Or like Dr. Seuss, like I used to love that shit. So I literally started writing like really cute baby poetry at like 7.
Yeah.
And then it just became a way like throughout my teens and like just growing up as something that a way to express. So I'd say like poetry or like spoken word, although I hate both of those words.
Yeah, right. Because of what it like implies, or like the type of vision you get in your head.
Right. Or
like,
I've been to an open mic, right? Because there was a certain point when I was like, I don't know, at the end of my teens where I was like, oh damn, I realized I'd written so much, because basically when poetry or these things, words that rhyme, came out, it was always at a point where I couldn't express any other way. Like, and I was usually like at a state of mental, complete under pressure or extreme like mental health struggles, and I felt like I can't get this out via movement, I can't get this out via music, there's just no way, and so it would just come out as words. And so I remember I tried to go to a spoken word open mic when I was about 19 or something, and I just got there and I was just baffled. But it's just like how there's all these little cultural cues, right?
Yeah.
So I know, like, I guess if anyone went to a crump session and hadn't been to one, they'd be like, what? Everyone's going, choo, what, choo?
Yeah.
They'd be like, what is going on? Like in spoken word, they all go,
oh yeah, and the click.
little clicks. And I was like, this is so weird. And then
I feel like that came, like, we use that in like other places now, and I feel like it came from spoken word. The first time I saw that was people like clicking, like,
really quiet.
Talk about it. Mm-mm.
Well, I don't know, man. I just found it really cringy, and then
It
like,
is a bit, innit?
and I found even just like certain, it's the way for me that it's so raw, like actually, and spoken word can be so truthful. Like to go straight there, it's like, this is a poem about rape, and you're just sitting there like, I don't know if I'm ready for this.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
That's another topic in itself, but like I have a thing about art in general, but especially like I find it in like theatre and dance stuff, when they just throw a topic on you and you're like, oh shit, like you almost feel a bit held hostage as the audience. And it's like, anyway, this is something I'm exploring in my work, is like kind of the audience's experience and making it not just about you, like, I want to talk about this, so you hear it and you listen, especially in mixed bills, when, you know, it's one thing if you've paid to see a show and you know the content, but when it's a mixed bill and it just someone's dancing and doing something cool and then the next act is like, oh Jesus Christ, okay, like it's a lot.
Yeah.
And it's just like, yeah, like you said, like it just throws you straight in and you're like, oh, okay.
I think maybe I should have gone to, and I have actually been to like some poets like own shows, because I think that is actually really fulfilling, and you might read the synopsis and realize, oh, this is a piece about exploring anger management in something, and you're like, okay, I'm prepared. But I think it was a bad idea. Like this open mic is just, you got like 20, 30 people going up one after the other, and it's an onslaught of emotional,
a lot of art is
content.
Is not great, not in its own context, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's like, even like you were saying about a crump session, but take that session and put it in the middle of somewhere else, it becomes really like, why is this happening here? Like,
it needs the context, right? And I guess, so I guess for me, it's like very hard not to cringe at that idea of like saying it out loud, or performing it in that way. But then,
like, remove the associations with
but also there's the spoken word voice. Dum da ba da da ba 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 ba.
Yeah.
Dun dun da 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 da. Dun ba da 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 da. I'm just like,
And it's like the flow as well, when they're like, when it's like they do those like,
God,
the word,
spoken word artists are gonna come for me now.
I don't know any, so it's all on you. But you know when they do like the word play that's like supposed to be deep and it's not, and it's like spoken word, open doors, windows, close, windows, wind, those.
I don't know.
Oh God! Like,
I guess also like I love rap. Like I got into like hip hop and grime. For me are like such massive inspiration. sources, and so like I do prefer it. I wish I wrote more bars, like or like I always get pissed off at myself because I write a lot, and then I'm like, why doesn't this, it will be triplets and then it will be like in 4/4 and then it will, I'm like, damn.
But you are a musician anyway.
Yes.
So I would wonder, like, why wouldn't your first thought be like, oh, I'm just gonna rap, like, because you play violin.
Yeah.
Do you sing?
No.
Okay. But it's like, I feel like there would be an easier option to do that than to do like something new. You know what I mean?
No, fully. It is in the works,
okay.
like in my own head, like because I have been collating pieces for a while, or I know there's like, I literally have like kill off verses, like I have a grime track, I have like a Kendrick style track, I have these things, and I think for me it's more like finding the process of coming out of my shell. As a closeted writer, as someone who has written for so long and never shared any of it, like I want to be really gentle with myself,
of course,
because a lot of it is really raw and really vulnerable, which is why maybe I shy away from those open spoken word mics. It's like, I think it will take me a long time to get to the point where I'm like, where I find the beat, where I find the sample that will like best like speak to what I'm saying in that verse, and I think it will, because whereas with like dance and music for me like are such different crazy realms of expertise, because it was basically, I started playing violin and dancing when I was 7 as well, and I was, in terms of violin, I was kind of like that prodigy kid. Like I did my grade 8 by the time I was 13.
Like that means nothing to me, but I'm assuming it's impressive. I'm like, grade 8, at 13, grade 8, whoa, like, not at 13.
I know, it doesn't mean shit.
But like, what age would you usually do that?
I don't know, but like most
13.
basically I was in orchestras like outside of school, which you'd audition for, like the National Youth Orchestra or the London School Symphony Orchestra, and I basically, the first one I went for was the London School Symphony Orchestra, and it's really nerdy as fuck. You basically go on your holidays and you like learn to play symphonies and classical music with loads of teenagers and stuff, and it is actually really jokes.
That
but
fun.
The first time I got into it, I was 14, and I got this, whatever, for my skill level, they put me as the leader of the second violins. And in an orchestra, if you imagine, it's in like a kind of half circle, right? You have the first violins, the second violins, the violas and the cellos. So, and there's loads of like bullshit status stuff in orchestras, like hierarchies. So first violins are the best, second violins are second best, and then whoever sits closest to the front is like the most high up, and the leader of the section is the one who essentially runs the sectional rehearsals, like conducts the whole 20 people behind them, so everyone's following you. I got that when I was 14.
Oh, sick.
And everyone in the front circle was like 18, 19, and and I didn't know any of these rules or any of these like politics, and I just walked in like, no, sit down, I'm so excited to play some Gershwin and some Tchaikovsky, and I looked next to me at these like teenagers who were
just like glaring at you.
They were legit like, they're like, who's this though? Why is she here? Why is she at the front though? What's she doing? And I was like, oh my god.
But was it a situation like after they heard you play and realised you were good? But is it not about that?
No, orchestras are weird. Orchestras are weird, and to be honest, classical music is weird. It's super elitist.
Right.
It's obviously, I was in that, so from like 7 to like 16 or so, and I just by 16 I was just sick of it. Like I was sick of these like rich white boys with their like trust funds and going to these courses, whereas my parents have scraped all the money together they could to get me to go, and just the air and the energy. And I remember it was probably around the same time that I fell out of that and the classical dance I was doing, and that I fell into hip hop, because I remember just coming into the scene and the energy and the vibes
different,
just so real. Like I was like, this is real, and I've been missing this forever. So it just felt like home when I found the hip hop scene.
That's amazing. And so would you say you specialize in crump and whacking?
Yeah, I say that to most people just for like convenience.
I feel like everyone, and maybe it was a bit more like, I think when I first started, it was a bit more, there was specialisms in styles, and I think there still is, but a lot of people do more than just the things that they do, if that makes sense. And like, you don't have to, like, I always talk about this with you know, like just because someone's a good level dancer only in one style, it doesn't mean they're shit at the other styles. It's like just because we know Frankie as a house dancer doesn't mean he wouldn't kick people's ass in hip hop if he wanted to. Do you know what I mean? It's like if you can dance, you can dance. It's just putting together the getting the foundations and little like idiosyncrasies, I guess, within the style. But so I can imagine you like saying that you specialize in crump and whacking, but I'm sure you've got a lot.
Yeah, I guess I got foundations in like I was in English. I auditioned for Zoo Nation Youth Company when I was 16,
right?
And so I was in that for like 2 years, and that was pretty much my introduction to everything. I mean, the audition was a shambles because I was like, I just learned like here and there 1 or 2 moves, and they're really intense about foundations. So
yeah, Zoo are pretty good at like giving you a bit of everything.
Exactly. So the audition, you've got an hour of popping, an hour of locking, an hour of break, an hour of whack, an hour of everything, and then you have to do the routine, freestyle in it. You know, I scraped my way into Zoom because I was like 16, and it was so mean actually. I mean, not mean, just like very blunt. What they did, they scored everyone out of whatever for each style and added it up to a final score. And then when they announced who got in, like in the audition actually, they read out your score. Oof. And made you stand in line. Ooh. It was like, actually, because I was in it, you know, Rory.
Yeah.
We were in Zoo Nation at the same time.
Really?
Yeah.
How old are you?
No.
I was like, are you 16?
I'm 23.
Okay.
But he was like 10.
Oh, wow.
He was literally 10 when he got in. And I think it was him. And then I was the next one, and I was 16, and I was like,
oh wow,
the next lowest. Like,
oh, really?
You know, it was a 10-year-old at 16, and then Bassett, who's like 11, and then me, and then someone else, and then Dylan and Jai and all of them lot who'd been in Zoo for like a few years who were my age, but they were all at the top end, you know.
Wow.
And I was just there like, oh shit, I got a lot of work to do.
Oh yeah, but that's like auditions aren't about acing it, because otherwise you wouldn't have much to learn, would you?
Exactly, no, and I learned so much, like, so I got loads of foundation styles there, and then, but I say crump and whacking because I legit, like, they're the styles that I travelled all over for, like, went to everywhere to learn from the pioneers and battled and in. So they are the ones that I'm, like, in love with.
They're your, like, competitive disciplines, let's say.
I guess, although I have pretty much stopped battling, like, I definitely stopped battling in crump, like... And actually whacking, I never really battled in. Like I learned it. How I learned whacking, I mean, I'm so happy I learned it this way. Is literally 4 to the floor. And I saw Julia and Fionn there, like a couple times, and they'd be dancing like literally all night. Everyone would be packing up and leaving. They'd still be like strutting down like the room, and I'd be like, oh my god, they're so incredible. Yeah. And I can't remember when this was. Maybe it was like 4 years ago. But I had done like a couple classes of whacking at Zoo, and I just hated it. I was like, to be honest, I was very anti-feminine, anti-female, anti all of that.
We're gonna circle back to that. Yeah, go on.
This was when I was in crump. So I was fully like all the time in tracksuits, snapbacks, all black, like Tim's. Yeah, I was dressing like a crumper and just doing that all the time. And then I saw these women. Showing like power and strength, but through that femininity, and I was just so drawn to it. And the way House of Absolute, or Julia as the director of that, whacks and teaches whacking is just so different to any class I've ever been to. Go on,
in what way?
Well, I mean, you can just see it even in the way she dances, and like this is what drew me to them at 4 to the Floor. Is like they were telling stories and like going round for round, and to house music as well. And house music was my first love, like before crump even. So I don't know, like you can see the martial arts influence massively. You can see how many different characters they're going through, like. The technique is there, but there's floor work, there's traveling, there's jumps. Like posing is not dramatic, it's not faux drama, it's real. Like if someone's staring at you in the eye and giving you like exactly where they are, a snapshot of exactly where they are in that moment in the music, what story they're telling. And it, like, I'd not seen that version of whacking, and I'd just seen the commercialized version of whacking, which was like, I can do fast arms.
Yeah.
And I'm sexy. Sexy, like the sexiness of it being at the forefront. And as a like young teenage or mid to late teenage human who was very confused about their sexuality, I was like, I don't like that.
It's interesting because also that's like, Yeah, I definitely see what you mean, but I think it's also like it's a version of sexuality, because it's like, who's to say that the House of Absolute, I don't know that you're not saying this, but like the House of Absolute version is sexy as well. You know what I mean?
Oh,
but then
yeah,
it's like it's
yeah.
this stereotype of what is sexy, which I see a lot with like the commercial scene as well, like the way that the routines are done. It's like, oh, there's one way for women to be sexy, and it's this, and it's doing this, and
Yeah, well, I can't speak on behalf of commercial, but I definitely see what you mean.
Yeah.
Like, I see that.
that's right. I'll take the heat for that one.
No, but I feel like I'm going to be taking a lot of heat off this. But with whacking, what's interesting is it is a dance that was born out of the oppression of like Latinx and black gay men in the 70s.
Right.
And yeah, and so like it is a gay dance.
Right.
It comes from that campness that comes with being gay. But I think what is lost in it when like maybe a female identifying people try to do it is when they try to just emanate what it is to be gay and to be camp, and don't actually delve into their own sexuality and go, well, what is that? What is my sexuality? Is it just, yes, I'm here, look at me? Or is it, I feel really deeply soft and slow, or, you know, sensual or raw? Like, what is your, I think sexuality as a concept is just so broad. Like,
of course, yeah.
you know, it's so beautiful and like multi-layered. And I think, yeah, like just basically for me, it was just before I saw Julia and Fionn dance, I actually hadn't seen that many, I realized I hadn't seen that many varying representations of sexuality, and particularly female sexuality.
That's
so
interesting. So would you say whacking is kind of, as a style, is intrinsically linked with like sexuality and your kind of let's say sexual expression?
I
Because
think
that's where it was born out of, I guess.
I think it is like intrinsically linked to that in a sense. Well, like for me, actually, one thing that I'm like figuring out if I identify with or not is like, so punking, what came before, sorry, I just said it. What came before whacking was punking.
Yeah.
So, and there's loads of actual like real beef and politics still to this day about that.
I've heard bits.
Yeah, so punking was the original form, and it was taken by those men who were like given the derogatory slur of punk, you know.
Okay.
You know, you punk, like as to mean gay, as in a horrible way. And they were like, we're going to make a style out of this. And they did. And like, you know, there's so, like all the original punks, Tinker, Lonnie, Andrew, Michael, like they all had their own styles. And it was really like character based. It was really just exploring like, yeah, freedom of sexuality, but also freedom of creativity and storytelling in those underground gay clubs. And like when Julia tells me, there's just so many influences, and one of the most incredible people is Victor Manuel, who's one of the last known living punks, and he just constantly posts on his Instagram every day like, this was inspiration, like Batman, like all of the sound effects in Batman, whack, boing, like all of these sound effects were direct inspiration. Like Looney Tunes characters were direct inspiration. Fantasia and the conductor in that animation, or Fay Ray from King Kong, like really specific cultural icons or moments that inspired this dance. And it's just, or like Julia tells us, there was this one guy in the club who had a belt. And so this is where this movement comes from, where you tie the belt. And it's like, I was never taught that in normal whacking. I was taught, boom, cat, boom, put your shoulder and over the head and whatever. Like when you hear the punks, or particularly Victor, talk about it, it's so, I just love history as well. Like I'm a super nerd. And so yeah, it is sexuality, but I think it's also just like this, what comes out of when people are oppressed and they find a safe space, and then they realize within that they can create something together. And it's like,
well, how do you feel about, because I've had this conversation, and I've had this inner conversation also, but like about, I always think about at least like my place in the culture, and me as a hip hop dancer, as a popper, like where I fit into a dance that was born from a place that I'm not in. Do you know what I mean? And how I can respectfully join and contribute even to this culture that's not mine, in a way.
for sure, yeah.
So, and I've definitely thought about that from especially the racial aspect and the kind of area. Like, I'm from England, I'm not from New York. Do you know what I mean? And then there's, you know, you have the grime scene over here, and that's a whole different way in for hip hop. But in terms of like something like whacking and stuff like that, like how does it work, or how do you see it with people who, let's say it was born from like men in the gay clubs? So being a woman maybe not necessarily as outrightly oppressed as they were in that day. Like, not obviously there's the whole gender discrimination thing, and that, not to say that that's not a thing, but also it's like let's say your day-to-day treatment and your way of being is very different from the gay men in the clubs in this time, maybe. Do you know what I mean? So how do you see that influence, and how do you see your place in it and being able to contribute to that type of thing? Do you ever question it, or?
I think I did in the beginning, maybe a bit. At the same time that I didn't, because like the oppression of I think really it's not oppression of like gay men or oppression of women.
Okay. It's
oppression of the feminine, and it's subjugation of those traits in wider society, in mainstream society. It's not just, it's weak for men to cry or show vulnerability, or, do you know what I mean? So I think, and then within women, like you're either a prude or a slut. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. There's like these crazy juxtaposing paradigms of like what sexuality is. It's so hard to figure out like where do you fit into it. And I think for me personally, because I can't speak on behalf of anyone else, but I think whacking helped me to understand my own queerness in the way that it fucks with the gender binary and fucks with its sexuality. Like, because I think like for me, how I connect to it is coming from a place of queerness and like seeing the LGBT community who created that, seeing the dance that they created and it being so validating in my identity, like as a dancer and as a mover first, and then like seeing how you can be masculine with it, how you can be feminine, how you could literally be both of those things at the same time with it. I don't know. I think
so. Like the legacy that was there at the beginning that's now still present is not necessarily the specifics of the people, it's the safe space aspect.
You just boom. The safe space aspect.
So it's like whatever you need to express here is valid, but what they've passed on is a safe space to do that.
I think so, 100%. And so it does make me sad actually when I see like beef and fighting about, you know, the origins and it should be called punking or whacking with a H. I understand like the intensity of those emotions. I mean, obviously I can't understand exactly, but you know, or even like how I can imagine how for that generation as well, it must be really strange to hear people like myself reclaiming the word queer, because queer was a really bad insult.
Got you, right.
Do you know what I mean? Back in the 70s and earlier. But language changes, language transforms. Like we have to accept that. And I think holding on to those little grievances aren't really going to help anyone find that safe space. So for me, it's about safe space, it's about education. I really wish more people knew like how deep of a style whacking is. Because I think a lot of people because I was one of those people, I thought it's so surface level.
I think this is kind of the problem also, because I kind of feel like that about every style. That,
no way.
Like in a way that every style has a cultural aspect to it, and we talk about I understand the culture, I understand your history, blah blah blah, but I think people don't really understand what that means, because I think the way that I would say some dance teaching has evolved now is almost in the same way that our education system is, in the sense of like learning to be able to pass a test. So when people talk about learning hip hop history, like for hip hop freestyle, let's say, it's like, oh, can you name enough social dances? That's it. And it's like, okay, cool. Like you can name all the social dances and you can do them properly and you know the techniques for them. Cool. It doesn't mean you know anything about the history or the culture of hip hop. Do you know what I mean? And like, and in a genuine way, not just like I said, not just knowing facts, like, oh, I know about the place where it started and I know the years, and it's like, all right, good shit. Like, who gives a fuck? Like, for me, it's like more a connection to, like, for me, what I would hold on to in the hip hop culture is like my upbringing with grime. And like, I grew up in the era where grime started. Like, I feel like I mention this every fucking podcast, but like, this is really something that's like, like intrinsic to me as a person. Like, I feel like it really shaped me, and like, it's really part of my teenage years was this thing that I didn't even know was a growing culture. And now you look at like Stormzy selling these big albums and stuff, and I was like, oh, I remember when this was just like you had to hear it on pirate radio, and like we used to go and do sets in some fucking guy's house who was DJing, and you know, like, so I think it's like I have a connection to a culture, if you know what I mean. And it's like you might have that similar, obviously you're into grime and stuff like that, but the way I would connect to grime, you might connect to like your queerness, and that's what brings you close to the like culture of whacking. No matter, that's your on ramp to that motorway, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, with a lot of these like surface level kind of things, the way we teach it is we don't teach anything about how you can connect to a dance style through yourself. Like, what is it in your history that connects to what? And it's like what we say is like, oh, here's what whacking is. It's, oh, you have to know this, you have to know this. Here's what popping is. You have to know how to hit, you have to know a Fresno, you have to know a walkout. It's like, yeah, they're useful vocabulary moves and cool, but it's like, what is it in you that makes you want to do this style? Is it just that the arms waving around look cool, or is it you've got something to express, or that you need, or that interests you even, and here's the right place to do it? Like, that's why I've never, I don't know, like, I think crump is really cool. There's nothing in me that wants to crump. So I've never tried it out of respect for the style and respect for myself. That it's like, okay, crump, it's cool. It looks cool. Like, you know, it could be that I could get a job doing crump if I got good at crump. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's
yeah.
whatever the thing might be. But I'm like, when I first started hearing about it, I was like, okay, let me understand this. I've got friends that were like really into it and stuff like that. Even though the old Wet Wipes and like Ricardo and all those guys, I used to know them back in the day loads. And I was just like, from everything I've heard and understand about this culture, there's nothing in me that's connecting to this. So cool, like I can appreciate it, but it's not for me.
Hey, it's so funny. What one thing I find really funny about certain younger dancers, or even just not even younger, just dancers in general who haven't found their place yet in a style or a culture or whatever they want to do, basically, is that insecurity and that like, oh, but I'm not sure what I should try, or maybe I should. I get a lot of people being like, oh, I think I want to try crump. Why? I think it's just cool. Like I just crump.
Yeah.
Cool. You know, and it's so weird because there is a thing in which you have to look inside yourself, and that is difficult sometimes to introspect and think, oh, what do I connect with as a human being? Yeah. It's also really fun. So yeah. But like this, what you just said about like finding a way in, there's also like so many ins, and I think that's what is crazy for people who are struggling. It's just like, go back to your childhood, go back, like, because I realized just when you said that, it's whacking, like funk, soul music. I grew up on Motown. Right. It's like Soul Train music. Like my parents just played that non-stop. So when I found out there was a dance to that, I was you know, and actually for me, like some of the earliest inspirations in my training was literally just watching Soul Train videos and trying to like emanate because it's not formed, and you see like the whacking there, and it's so loose, and it's like that's the origin point, and I really relate to that music. And so, you know, and with crump, like when someone is where they're meant to be and they know it, they're undeniable. Like, and I think that I can say that for anyone. You know, you see when someone step into the cypher and you know that they know they're meant to be there. Like with crump, it's like I think for me, once you've been deep in crump, and I mean like seriously, it never leaves you. Like so even though I've like sort of left the scene, and yes, I probably do feel like guilt or weirdness about that, like it's so deep within me, like, and how much I traveled for that style, and how like the people that I learned from, like those lessons will just like never leave me, because they're I guess for me, like crump, how I related to it, so many reasons, but the maleness, the masculinity, the rawness, the anger, I definitely had so much like. And I always used to fight people who'd be like, oh, it's aggressive. I'd be like, no, it's not aggressive. It's just expressive. And I'm like, nah, now I've stepped back. I'm like, no, you have some serious.
You're like, the style might not be, but I was.
But I was. No, and the thing is, that's also why I had to step back, because I had to recognize that certain behaviors or ways I was going about my training and battling was unhealthy. Like I have... I mean, like a lot of people, severe like anxiety and like issues with that. And I realized I was literally having panic attacks before like every battle. Damn. But after prelims. Yeah. And there's some crazy moments. Like, I mean, I remember one time in just a street battle, someone called me out in just a session. And this was like when I was kind of in that space where I was fading out and I wasn't sure where I was really. And they called me out, and literally I went into the circle, track played, and I just stood completely still. Like I couldn't move. Damn. Like I was so anxious or like disassociation is like a sort of thing, what's it called, a symptom of anxiety where you disassociate from your body. So I was just standing there, the guy came in, killed me off and around, stepped out, I stood in, I just stood there. And it's what's mad actually to me within Crump is like the fact that I don't think anyone, or within maybe a lot of hip-hop styles, I'm definitely going on a tangent here.
That's right.
But there are people, there's not enough understanding about mental health and like caring for each other.
I would argue that that's the world as well.
In the world,
but
yeah.
definitely.
But like, especially when you're going head to head in like these super intense like collisions of like energy and like, yeah. But anyway.
And it's also what you said about feeling like those things have stayed with you even if kind of you've been out of the scene or whatever. But it's like, these things are really a part of you. And I think the scene moves on very quickly.
Oh yeah.
Like this is something we've seen over so many years. That it's like if somebody's not around for a few months of battles, it's like bye. Like we forgot about you. You know, and it's just kind of how it is, and that's fine. Like there's a lot of stuff happening, and if you don't keep relevant, it's not that people don't care or don't want to hear from you, but it's just like, okay, cool. Like you're not here, so you know, whatever. And there's a lot of like trying to be relevant and stuff and trying to keep up appearances and stuff. But it's hard to balance that with, you know, wanting to do stuff in your own life, especially when battles and stuff aren't earners. You're not making full-time living off battles. Well, not a lot of people are anyway. And it's tough, but I've seen a lot of people that are like get good when they're young. I'm sure we all know people like this, that it's like you get good when you're young, and then the pressure and stuff, it messes you up, and you're like, I have to stay here, I have to do stuff, but I need to get money, I need to get a job, I'm growing up, I just got a girlfriend or whatever, and it's like, do you know what I mean? And it's like
that's basically exactly what happened to me.
Right, there you go, yeah.
No, but I think it's actually kind of a blessing as well. Like I'm actually really grateful that I got to do everything I did like in my teens, because I think I came on the scene when I was like 16, 17, 18, 19. I was like full on in Crump, and I was like going to battles and traveling to like all the EBS A-list and stuff. And then when I was like 19, that's when I got to like the semi-finals of EBS. And I remember it was so mad, because basically also like loads of my life is like these weird little rivers that be intersecting, and I'm trying to find a way to bring particularly music and dance in my life really together, because they've been separate, and like I've been two different people for so long. But even within that EBS weekender, like where I was going mad, like battling, sessioning in Germany, it was the weekend before I started my uni course, studying jazz violin. And I was going into that. It's just so crazy, like the juxtaposition, because I kind of knew in my head that this would be the last big battle that I did. Like, so I think subconsciously, which is why I pushed so hard, because I knew when I went back, it would be another life, and I'd be reinventing myself again, because I had done classical violin my whole life, and now out of the blue, I just went to study jazz violin, and I had a crazy 3 years of. So I do think, like, actually as well, you know, within these intersections of my life, like certain things faded out for a reason. Like Crump faded out while I was freaking learning jazz, which is a whole long history in itself. And actually Baby Tight said to me once in a workshop, he was like, Crump is jazz. Crump is a jazz dance. And
interesting,
bruv, it's so true. Like the parallels, the levels of technique in both of them that you have to attain to then be able to let go and freestyle is just like,
jazz, from the very little I know, jazz is insanely complicated. I tried to watch a few like videos and stuff on it, and I was like, what the fuck, man? Yeah,
well, I think is I'm not really concerned with the what the fuck stuff as much. Like I kind of went into that course just to like have that information, and I still haven't downloaded half of it. But also for the people, because basically I met my band Nihilism the summer before I started that course, and then I literally like they're such G's. So Benjamin Apia, I have to shout them out. Lorenzo Kelosenko, Christopher Liu, Deji Ikshekin. These 4 boys, man, men now. They're just crazy, and they're so raw and so hilarious, and they took me to my first jam, and when I went, we were actually playing music for a contemporary dance course.
Oh, cool.
Like in the summer, I just found them on Facebook and was like, hey, can you come play live music at Erdang?
Sick.
And then they took me to a jam that week. And I remember walking in, and literally, like, you know, you got a saxophonist in the middle of the room. He starts a solo. Everyone comes around him in a circle. And I was like, wait, what? And then the drummer, everyone goes around the drummer while he starts solo. I was like, this is hip hop. This is hip hop. Like, this exists in music. Because I'd literally been playing classical my whole life. I was like, okay. And then, I followed Ben to uni.
Sick.
I applied through clearing. and did that. And I still don't, like I said, still haven't downloaded all the info. But like I use, basically the music we write is hip hop, it is grime, it is funk. It's literally just all of our influences like melted together in this like sauce.
Sick.
The sauce.
The sauce. That's really cool. Let's circle back to the sexuality thing, because so we were talking about like kind of whacking being this safe space and stuff, and you were saying that it's like your recent, I don't know how you would phrase it, like your recent development in your life.
Mate, it's okay. You can say coming out.
Is it? Oh, is that how you say it?
Well, I would say coming out because it's the thing that people like understand most relevantly. Even though, like in the post that I wrote of my coming out,
I didn't even see the post, so I'm like coming at this from brand new. So
that's sick, mate.
Explain me everything.
Well, I was just gonna say, even in the post that I wrote coming out, I wrote I don't believe in coming out.
Okay, right.
As a cultural construct, because it repeats the idea of like cis heteronormativity, that like we're all straight and we're all like cisgender,
and like that you have to announce it if you identify as something other than that.
Yeah, and for me, I guess it wasn't. I didn't want to do it. Like actually, I wasn't preparing to do it. It wasn't something that was on my mind. Like, I know it was on my mind because actually over this whole lockdown, what's been really cool is like connecting with certain people who I'd always wanted to connect with, but just never had a chance. And one person is Emma Houston, Ems, my G. Like we connected right at the beginning of lockdown because they had COVID, I had COVID, like really early on. Yay! Got really sick, both of us. And so I just hit them up because they had posted on Instagram like I had COVID. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, because I hadn't heard of anyone else having it. So yeah, we connected over that, over the symptoms and recovery. But then over gender, over sexuality, just talking about these things. And I've, not really had someone to talk about those things with before. So they helped me a lot in understanding. I'm very much like a really active trans ally and LGBT. I'd always call myself an ally, which is weird because I'm like bi, pan, whatever you want to call it. But over lockdown as well, one of the things that I realized or started to occur to me, which is what I was writing about in that post, was that without meeting people in real life, I was no longer having to perform. And I guess we perform in every aspect of ourselves, right? Like our character is how we speak, mannerisms, all of that. But like actually just on a base level, how I felt day to day in terms of gender identity. And gender is just like so nuanced, but I don't know, like when the water settled, when everything became still, it was like I started to look myself in the mirror and actually see what it is I'd been trying to see for like really long, but I had been performing. So I'd been leaving my house and being like, hi, I'm Saskia, I'm female. You know what I mean? And yeah, so I came out as gender non-conforming, as non-binary, although I prefer like the terms gender queer and gender fluid. Okay. Because that implies fluidity. And pronouns like they, them, she, her. I don't mind she, her. And I think that comes from having a learned solidarity of the feminine, because I had to learn basically in relation to the whole crump thing, because I know this is where we're circling back to, is like that space and time. It's like I was super anti-feminine. I was like so anti-female from really young. I like hated Barbies. I hated makeup. Anyone give me a skirt, I'd like death stare them. And I was like 6 years old, like, you know. And I didn't know why. I just didn't like any of that stuff. Growing up, becoming a teenager, people start to look at you as you go. People start to harass you. People, you know. So I have a learned solidarity with females and feminine people because of that oppression that I've experienced with identifying as that for most of my life. But I think, I really owe it to these styles, and I guess that's why I champion them so much, is like then when I found whacking, I was able to express my sexuality and express like femininity, and that was the first time I feel like I really stepped into being female. Honestly, like I was playing male and playing mask like my whole life up until that point. Like I was always one of the guys, like all my friends were guys, like I would always gravitate, and I still do gravitate to male only spaces, and feel really comfortable in them. Like it's not And as soon as I clocked, that's because you're gender non-conforming. That's because you're genderqueer. Like, it just made sense. I wasn't anymore like, oh, I'm the female in the group, or you know, I'm the odd one out, because I wasn't. And it was just society that was looking at, like, society's idea that I'm a woman that was making me that way. Or even within Crump, I feel like there's such pressure on female crumpers to like be buck and like be strong. I don't know, but essentially that's where I sit with it. And people like Emma, people like so many other beautiful transgender queer people have helped me to like understand what it means, because gender identity and like gender expression are also different.
Okay.
So like what you wear doesn't have to match up with how you feel.
Okay.
It took me a long time to get it also.
So it makes a lot of sense. I'm just taking it in. So you first of all, so you're, let's say, like, coming out, which we don't like the term, but we're using it.
We're using it.
Was more about the gender expression rather than your sexuality.
I mean, I think is I'd also never like publicly said, oh yeah, like I'm queer, like I'm attracted to like all kinds of people. That I didn't feel like I needed to tell anyone that as well.
But you were kind of open with it in your personal life, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
Like with your friends and stuff, like you were.
100%. Like it's not. But it's also really funny, isn't it? Like, because sexuality, like who you sleep with or who you want to sleep with, they just seem like such personal things. It is so funny that we do have to tell people, but whatever. Yeah, I feel like I kind of said that at the same time in the same post as the whole gender coming out thing. Just like, because
while I'm here.
Well, the reason why I did it as well is because Artists for Artists did this survey. They're doing the survey, and they had 3 boxes. They had male, female, non-binary, and I was like, and I was like, and eventually I just ticked non-binary, and then I was like, well, I gotta cat's out of the bag now. gotta make a post now. Like, I can't just sit here and not. And the thing is as well, is like, everyone's becoming more aware of these things. Like, so many people are posting, like, post your pronouns, even if you're cis, just be like he, him, make it a normal thing, like, so that you just don't accidentally disrespect someone or make someone feel awkward, you know? Like my sister's generation, she's like 13, so she's 10 years younger than me. Like, she's put her pronouns in her bio, like it's just the norm for them. And I think is wonderful. So, you know, I was like, this is ridiculous that I don't have my pronouns in my
Speaking
bio.
of the pronouns thing, do you feel like, because I definitely get the sentiment behind, you know, putting it in your bio and just that type of thing, but do you also think that it's like, let me explain before I continue, like, I'm going to say, like, it's not big of a deal, but I don't mean it's not a big deal to disrespect someone, but I mean like, in the sense that, like, if my name's Jonathan and I don't like being called John, and then you go, oh, John, and I'm like, oh, you know, just call me Jonathan, then it's like, and then then if the person is an asshole about it, cool, but like, I feel like I guess it's something I never stress about, because I feel like, oh, someone will just correct me, you know what I mean? Like, not knowing is once someone corrects you the first time, then you're an asshole. But if you didn't know and someone goes, oh, by the way, I prefer this, it's like, oh, cool, fair enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, for sure. Ignorance isn't anyone's... It's kind of a cultural... Like, ignorance is a thing. It's out there. And I think, you know, no one is at fault if they don't know. But I think also the other side of ignorance is intelligence and is learning and is education. So, like, also in lockdown, I've just become so... Some things I've become so excited about are just topics that I've never even delved, like disability rights issues and advocacy, and like starting to follow loads of like disabled queer YouTubers, or just like these kinds of, and you just learn about these whole worlds and cultures and people that you just didn't know existed. And I don't know, for me it's really enlightening. So
for sure.
And I think for a lot of people, I think genderqueer and trans people, you know, when you just meet someone who's like, oh, my pronouns are they, them, it's like, what? But then as soon as you start doing it and using it, it's just so easy.
You know, I feel like, I definitely think so. And I think I definitely like am speaking from my own echo chamber of people that I'm around, but I think the people that I'm speaking to and are around who are, let's say, not, or don't identify as like trans or anything like that, are more scared about accidentally offending someone. You know, like that's the most thing I think I hear or that I get. Like obviously, again, like I said, it's my echo chamber, so I'm not going to be around anyone that's outwardly like fuck trans people. Do you know what I mean? So it's not going to be in my friendship circle, although those people exist.
Yeah.
But the people that I'm around or speak to are often like, I'm happy for them. But I just don't want to accidentally, you know, do something wrong, and it being more that being scared of like, you know, upsetting someone just because they didn't know, like you said, the ignorance, or it's like I was never taught this, so I don't know how to go about it. We're not taught it in school, and it's not unless you speak to someone and have these conversations.
Yeah.
You're not going to learn. And I think also the troubling thing is because there's so much ignorance and so much judgment and so many people who are, let's say, starting conversations with an agenda to judge or to give you shit, basically.
Yeah.
That often I feel like people that are not trying to cause any harm and just really are trying to learn, it sometimes feels scary for people trying to learn because they're like, oh, I just want to ask you about why do you want to be called and they're like, you don't tell me, ask me why, because they're used to people using that question as a way to start digging at them.
For sure.
Does that make sense? What I'm saying?
Yeah, it does. I think the thing, don't be afraid to ask a question. First of all, to anyone who's listening, just like, please ask a question and try to ask it in a sensitive way. Try to ask it in a way that isn't going to like invade that person's privacy and ask it in a respectful way.
What's a version of like, because also stuff like sexuality and gender are very personal. So what would you say is a way to do that without getting too personal, without offending someone?
In terms of pronouns, like, and this is why I'm really happy in some circles that it's becoming normalized.
Yeah.
Like when you meet someone saying like, oh, hey, what's your name? Saskia. Oh, my pronouns are they, them.
Like you would say.
Yeah, I could say that. Oh, what's your pronoun? Or asking someone, what's your name? And then when they say their name, oh, like, do you have preferred pronouns? Like, what are your pronouns?
Okay.
And that becoming normalized. I think that's definitely not like personal at all. It really is just like a descriptor. And like you said, like a name. It's like if someone broke up, I know Sai's birth name isn't Sai. He hates being called his birth name. So I'm not going to call him that.
Yeah, of
Do
course.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like a respectful thing, I think. And I guess like, I wouldn't be afraid of rebuttal, like of what you just described of like people like, don't ask that's too personal, because frankly, like, I wouldn't be afraid of getting a bit of like anger or tension towards you, because the thing is like particularly gender non-conforming people receive that kind of tension and anger forced upon them like every day when they walk down the street. There's this guy I follow on Insta, he's incredible, called Alok, and he's like got loads of like chest hair, a beard, wears dresses, makeup, you know, he gets like harassment all the time and gets questioned all the time when he's in a corporate space or in a business space, like, what are you doing here? Because people are just gawking at him, do you know what I mean, for his appearance, and that's just like how they want to look, you know. But anyway, if anyone wants to listen to another podcast like related to these things, it's Alok and Jamila Jamil have an incredible conversation on Jamila's podcast, I Weigh.
Sick.
So, and that's way more eloquent probably than anything I'm going to say. So I'm just go there and listen to that.
From my side, please excuse any heavy-handed discussion of this topic. I'm just learning.
No, it's great. I really want to speak about it more. And that's the thing, is like I found that when I'm more open about it, people aren't afraid to ask about it. So when I did recently this Insta story where I just was like explaining how my fluidity like is on a day-to-day, like how I feel, people just messaged me like out of the blue, like someone was like, oh, can I just ask what are your pronouns then? Someone, a mother of a child, messaged me and was like, hey, how do you think I should teach this to my kid, because it's really hard to teach a kid that gender isn't binary. And I just said, look, like because I had my sister was 3, I was 13, you know, I was figuring this out as well, and I said to her when she was like 3 years old, I was like, you do know that sex and gender are separate things? And she was like, okay. Simple. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, she's accepted like trans identity from such a young age because I was just I taught her like that those things are separate. Some, you know, gender is who you are in your brain and sex is what you are in your body. Yeah.
Well, I think that's also something that I don't know. I feel like there's so much argument over that, and I don't understand why some of the time, because it's like, I think the understanding that sex and gender are two different things kind of should, it's like, you know, when people are like, you know, especially ignorant people, when you talk to them and they're like, oh, I don't get it, no, she's got a dick, or like, you know what I mean, and it's like, so that's a man, and it's like, well, that's sexual your sex is that you were born with the male genitalia or whatever, and then your expression of that is different. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's, for me, is like such a simple concept that just doesn't get communicated somehow, that it's just like, yeah, but it like it's
yeah. Well, no, so many binaries though. Like we try, like in society, like rich, poor, good, evil, like black, white. Like there's so many binaries that we create to separate ourselves from each other and polarize and create these kind of conflicts. And it's not even us, it's society, but like within gender as well, like within sex isn't even binary, like because sex isn't just your genitalia, it's your chromosomes, it's your hormones, it is also your genitalia, it's your like internal organs, like different. And actually within that, you know, that's why you have intersex people, is where like those things don't even match up. Like some people have an XY chromosome and the genitalia of the other sex, you know, and then they might secrete more testosterone than someone else, and like you know, there's so much basically biological variation existing, period, you know, even within, you know, even beyond gender, race, like you know, fatness, hair, like so many different things. There's so much variance, and that includes gender in the brain and in the body. But it's just that society has enforced these binaries, and sadly as well, is it's all linked to colonialism. It's like the gender binary was like imposed upon, you know, even in the Americas, when, you know, white European people came and colonized America, and the Native Americans had multiple genders. And in India, before it was colonized, they had hijras, I think, who were like sacred, like people who communed with like spirits and like held rituals and ceremonies, and they were always genderqueer people because they were thought to be able to have that closer contact to both sides of the masculine and feminine, and therefore they were closer to God. And it's just like it's really sad to me as well, because I also had like quite a intense discussion with someone recently who actually was like didn't believe that sex and gender were separate.
Okay.
And it was really cool because I've not actually had to confront someone like that. But it makes me sad because it's race and gender are like so interlinked, and the oppression of like how gender binary is fundamentally a racist construct, you know, as well. Like,
interesting.
And that, it's like they're all connected. We need to come together, everybody.
I think it's also interesting because you were saying about coming out, people coming out with their sexuality. And I think, you know, you were saying like, why should we have to, you know, discuss something so personal about who you sleep with or whatever? And it's like, actually, because it's similar in a way that there's an identity that we put on someone who's gay. There's an identity that we put on someone who's straight. So it's like, if you're like a person that's walking around and just like any of these, you don't have these stereotypical, in air quotes, gay qualities on an out, do you know what I mean? Then you have to come out and let everyone know, oh, I sleep with men or I sleep with women. And it's like, but you like, if we take away the identity, there should be really no need to come out.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
No, and I mean, like, so even, and especially in your relationships and stuff, like, because I've been with my partner now for like over 3 years. And like, when I came out in Virgos to him, he was like, yeah, I know. Like, okay, cool. Yeah. Like, I was always, and even we had this really nice conversation later where he was like, I was attracted to just you. Do you know what I mean? And like, or even vice versa, like, he was called gay growing up, and people were like, oh, you're so gay, and like, because he was really effeminate. And I know I'm attracted to his effeminateness, and like, you know, and it's so interesting that when you start to like deconstruct it in your brain, the gender binary, and like you really start to see how much it's ingrained in our society, from bathrooms to forms to, you know, it's so deeply embedded. And then when you let go of it, you're like, you just start to look at people like gender amoebas. You're just like,
so then
I joke.
How would you, what's your views on someone like myself that would like identify as one of the, like, do you feel like, or even let's say with sexuality, because that's something I can participate in, but like, do you feel like it's not, I don't want to say wrong, but like that everyone should, ideally we should aim for a place where everybody's gender non-conforming and everybody's like sexually fluid? Or do you feel like, also like, do you feel, this is an interesting topic because I've had some thoughts about this as well, but like, do you feel like people that are like identifying as one of the things haven't like done the inner work, or is it valid to identify just as male or as female?
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, like I think it's a spectrum, right. But like you can 100% be at the end of that spectrum, or you know, you can be right. There, male, female, and especially if it's something you've never questioned in your life, then I think you could be pretty confident and just be like, yeah, this is who I am.
But how do you know that you haven't questioned it, or what's the difference between it being your choice or just society's ingrained it so much that you've never questioned it because society's just told you that?
Well,
like no, I feel like this about being a straight man. I'm like, I wonder if I grew up in a society where everybody was bi, if I just be like, oh yeah, guys are hot too. Do you know what I mean? And or if it's like, because then in my head I'm like, I've questioned this so many times, especially like the more I've been around people that talk about these issues. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, right, let's sit down and think about guys for a second. and I'm like, right, I've been straight my whole life. Like, I don't know, maybe it's just because I haven't thought about it. Right, let's have a think. I'm like, right, who's hot?
I love that.
I'm like, much. and then I kind of like, there's a part of me that gets a bit disappointed when I'm like, no, I'm not into him. And there's a part of me that's like, damn, you're just being closed-minded. Try again.
No, you know what? That's amazing. Yeah. First of all, that's amazing. And actually really relates to something that my partner showed me yesterday. He was like, showed me this like tweet or something. He was like, if you say you don't like broccoli and you've actually tried broccoli and you don't like it, aren't you more likely to like have more grounding than someone who just says they don't like broccoli and they haven't tried it? And then
Yo, I said this a while ago.
Says something about gays, and then he says something about gay sex, and I'm like,
yep. Yo, I said this a while ago. It's like, I feel like that would be the like people that say they're like, no, I'm 100% straight. It's like, you haven't tried it. No, kiss a guy and then you can tell me you're straight.
Well, the thing is like, I think in both realities, right, of sexuality and gender, it's like you can 100% be like one side or the other. You know, you can be completely heterosexual, you can be completely cisgender. But I think what the gender binary does, regardless, like to everyone, is it really restricts us. It like toxic masculinity is so real and so raw and killing so many incredible men. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, male suicide is just and you know, and it is because of these constraints and these rules that we're taught growing up. And I think someone like yourself is like, I feel like you're the kind of person, I can just sense from your energy, you're like, I don't take bullshit. Do you know what I mean? I try not. Tell when you're not, you know, being straight with me. And I think that applies to maybe like certain things you might have been taught growing up, and you're like, oh, why are you telling me I have to be like this to be a guy? And you can shed that. You can be like, I choose not that. I don't choose.
It's very hard though.
100%.
It's very hard.
Exactly. And for me, like, I was really anti from the beginning of like people telling me that I should like this kind of music or like these kind of toys or like these kind of colors because I'm a female child. Just like it was immediately like incongruent to my brain, and I was like, this doesn't make sense. Why are you telling me what I should do or like or be? And then when I got older and, you know, begrudgingly somewhat accepted that female identity, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I can like some of this stuff. But then now I'm just sitting back in myself. I'm like, yeah, but I don't. And actually, like, how I feel, honestly, like, just to even explain it really smallly, like, my gender is like, I feel male baseline, like masculine is like my inner world.
Can I ask a question before you continue?
Yeah.
So let's say if it's the societal identity that's put onto our genders, so then what I struggle with is like, okay, if we take that idea that society has put these masculine and feminine, then there's nothing that's inherently masculine or feminine.
Exactly.
So then my question is like, what feels when you say you feel
what
masculine,
feels masculine? Yes.
It's like technically nothing's masculine.
Yes, I know. Yeah. No, it's really, you do get into like a bit of a grey area there, but then like I do think nothing is like, you know, this isn't feminine or masculine. Like the clothes that I'm wearing, if I put makeup on or not, it isn't. But I do,
especially with like traits, like the personality traits or things about you. Because people are always like, oh well, females are caring and empathetic. It's like, well, so are men. And it's like, oh, men are strong, and it's like,
it's all bullshit. Like really, that's the thing. That's the thing that I want to get to. A place of a society that I want to get to is not that we're all gender fluid and queer. It's that we just understand that all these ideas around these concepts are just bullshit, and we should just be ourselves. And I guess when I say like I feel inherently masculine, it's like someone said it to me who just met me the other week, Helder, who's like on this project. Yeah. They were like, describe each other in one sentence. I don't know, it was like a task in the project. And Helder was like, Saskia's just buck all the time. Just all the time. Like how I speak, how I interact with people. And I was like, yes. I was like, thank you, mate. Like you just see me, and he's a very introspective guy. So I take that I hold that dearly, like that you can see my core essence. And I think, I don't know, honestly, I couldn't tell you how or exactly why. It also relates to the physicality, like my body, and that's definitely personal, and I don't really want to go into that. But people transition, innit? People actually feel so dysphoric about their body that they have to get top surgery or take hormones to come to a place where they feel comfortable in themselves, because that reflects who they are in their head. For me, I don't feel any need to transition, because like I can actually I can disconnect from, and I wrote this in my post, I said the parts of my body that you might see as inherently female or feminine, to me they just aren't. Okay. And that's just my reality. And I don't even, and because it's about my body and shit, like I don't expect anyone to, agree with me. I'm just like, that's just me. Right. And if it helped, basically the reason why I shared this information is simply because it was other people sharing that information that helped me to see myself, and to see a way that I could express myself and be comfortable, and it's just literally if anyone else sees that and they're like, oh my gosh, I relate. Yeah, of course. And that's it really. Yeah, I think it's really important. I was having this conversation actually this morning with Jenny, but about like when you talk about these things, you kind of I guess like give people the courage to do the same, or like even now, like to share with each other is like it makes me think about these things and kind of makes me feel like if ever I wanted to, like if I hadn't already thought about these things, it gives me a safe space to go, oh well, if I do want to think about these things or talk about these things, I can do it now, which I think is mad important as well. Yeah, for sure. But it's I'm like mad into I'm mad into sexuality. The thing is I've always been mad into all this stuff as well. I've always like sex education, particularly like alternate style relationship styles, like just because I think like a lot of us, our sex education in the UK was shit or whatever. I didn't have any. We didn't have any. And so, even the stuff that's come out in the scene, which is really raw recently, of like consent and, and I made this long ass video about it. It's like, we weren't taught this. We were not taught this, and I had to teach myself. I wasn't taught how to put a condom on. What? Are you mad? I had to figure it out. That's insane. I didn't get taught. I legit didn't have sex education in school. That was the one lesson we were taught. That's crazy though. That's insane. And now it's compulsory. I don't know if you know that, but in the basically the last time they made a law about it was in 2003. Sick. Great. Yeah. But then like different organizations like Brooke and other like charities have been lobbying to get a new thing passed that is LGBTQ inclusive. Yeah. And so they have, and it's now compulsory in schools, although obviously because of everything that's happened this year, it's been pushed back. But it's interesting to see, it'll be interesting to see how they actually implement inclusive education and an education period, because it is really sad, because I think for a lot of people, young people coming of age, their experiences are really like raw, sometimes non-consensual, sometimes painful, and later traumatic, and I think, oh man, I'm really passionate about this stuff. So me too. I think like one thing that's like really a big again, I was talking about this morning, like life mission for me that I haven't figured out how to embark on just yet, is like straight male sexuality. I think is a big blind spot in society. I think we're such a demographic that perpetrates a lot of bullshit and a lot of oppression and a lot of like problematic behavior that
people aren't taught the right way. They're taught what not to do. But I always think of like me growing up. I have so many, really now at 31, looking back, I've had a lot of like problematic experiences and a lot of things that I don't necessarily identify them as traumatic, but things that I'm like, oh, if I was a young girl and I told people, or even, if I was a woman now and I told people, oh, I had these things growing up as a young girl, people would be like, oh my God, that's horrendous, or this or that. But it's like, as a guy, I'm like, oh, but I know loads of guys that have gone through this. Like I was just even talking about the other day about being pressured into sex.
Yeah.
Like, do you know how many times I've been pressured into sex, and people around me, men that have been pressured into sex, and I feel like as a young girl, maybe there's more sensitivity or more support for people that feel like that. And it's not to say like, oh, we have it worse or any of that. I hate when people misunderstand me and they think that I'm saying that men have it. No. What I'm saying is I'd love to have more support. And we talk about, men's like suicide and men's mental health and stuff. And I think a lot of it comes from stuff like that, where it's like, even the whole idea of, men have to want sex all the time, and like, there's, we should be into this, we should be into this, we should do this, we should act like this. And I think we're so forced into this like way of thinking that we don't even realize that things are like messed up. I'm realizing, like I said, in the last 4 years or so, maybe since I've been with Jen, like that's a whole journey that I'll probably speak about on the podcast at some point, but like she's really helped me with a lot of this stuff. And like now I'm looking back and realizing like, oh shit, like there's this time I didn't want to have sex any of these times.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I didn't even know that I didn't want to have sex. Like that's insane.
Yeah.
And it's like I recognize now, like, oh cool, like I have a thing about like I don't want to be pressured into sex, and I realize that is because it sounds obvious that you don't want to be, but I get really sensitive about it.
No, it's completely like your reactions, and particularly in these kind of situations where we're so vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's so hard to understand your own, like to understand where you are emotionally, because you're also trying to compensate for someone else's emotions and physicality and all of that. Like you're probably thinking more about them, to be honest, than you are about you. And that really makes you even more vulnerable. I think, I mean, we're honestly, like, we are all complicit in a culture that preaches non-consent and non-consensual sex and relationships. That permits it, and sees like guys egging each other on, like, oh, like go get her, and like, ultimately, like, what's that word? I can't remember the word. Where you perpetrate? No,
peer pressure. No. What we took.
Whatever, like just continuing like rape culture and like even though just basically practicing these things, like it's not men, it's women as well. It's not just men, it's women as well. It's gender non-conforming people, it's trans people. Like we're all taught wrong, and so we go into these situations without the tools that we need to like navigate them properly. So I think it's so, I think straight male sexuality is just as like valid as any sexuality, and if anything, should be talked about just as much, because it's just, I mean, sexuality is a place where you're at your most vulnerable. It's a place, where you also want to be like to see someone else's vulnerability, and that needs to just be handled with the utmost care, with the greatest care. And I think it's crazy, it really is mad, like how I think it ties in with British culture as well, like not saying how you feel or politeness or overcompensating and things like that. Like they really play into the kind of problems that you can come into contact with. Like,
and I also think, like, I don't think it's 100% the only reason, but I'm like, if you kind of repress or teach people these horrible things, like they say straight men, like no wonder there's stuff like toxic masculinity, and like people have this twisted version of what being a man is and what sex as a man should be, and like there's all these ideas that are out there. I'm like, no wonder, because look at how we treat 15, 16, 17-year-old boys who are fucking horny for the first time. Like we treat them like this, and then they become these men that don't know how to communicate, and it's like
shame. Shame is like the most toxic tool, I think, that stops you from learning from such a young age. I mean, like masturbation, like it's normal. Like a lot of like sex play and young children, like in countering that, you know, is actually normal. And if their parents actually, there's this incredible Instagram called Sex Positive Families, follow them, because they deliver loads of sex education and advice for like for families growing up with young kids. How do you talk to your kids about
I might need
stuff?
it. I didn't have sex education.
No, but it's just great. It's like to talk about things like masturbation in a non-shameful way, to talk about like sex in a non-shameful way, or sexuality and your body in a like just calling your body parts what they are, as opposed to like weird names.
Yeah, we talked about this in I did a lot of safeguarding training when I worked in schools, like a lot. And yeah, they talked about that. They were like, if you can't say the word penis or something to a child that you're talking about, like then and you're making it this taboo word, they're not going to feel comfortable to come to you when they have like I forgot what the word is, like when they tell you something that happened. I don't know. There's a word for it. I forgot.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, they're not going to come to you and they're not going to feel comfortable to talk about these things. And it's like, we have to stop making it this like, like taboo subject to say these things. Yeah. It is weird that like sex is it's so good.
I'm actually loving where this is fucking going.
But it's like legit, like, all right, let's not fucking beat around the bush. It's fucking good, right? And it's so beautiful, and it's something that everyone does. Like there's the old granny on the train has given head before. Like it's fine to know that. Like
people are gonna be like, what the fuck is going on?
It's all good, guys. This is a grown-up podcast.
Yeah, X-rated.
No, but this is the point. Is like it shouldn't be a grown-up. It's for everyone.
No,
we're not saying anything shameful. No, but it's like everyone does it.
Yeah,
it's great. It's beautiful when done correctly and with all parties' consent. So why is it so shameful to talk about? And the juxtaposition and the paradox of how much we use sex to sell stuff and how in movies...
Let's go there. Let's go there. Let's go there.
Talk about it. But like we use it to sell movies. We use it to sell products. We use it to sell... everything. There's like, oh, this new car came out and a girl with a bikini for some reason, which is like, okay, that's one thing. And I wouldn't mind it as much if it wasn't juxtaposed with the shame. We can't talk about it.
Yeah, it's
like there's a sex scene in the or there's like a girl in a hot fucking outfit, let's say like Black Widow in Marvel movies. Put her in a sexy tight outfit, but I can't talk about that in public, that she's hot and I find her attractive because the sex,
because you're objectifying
the sex
her,
that I'm being sold is shameful somehow.
It's shameful. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, there's so many facets to it, but let's go there. Let's talk about cuties. I don't know if you thought I was going to go there.
No, I didn't, but I got because I have opinions, but also I haven't seen it, so I feel slightly ignorant, but let's talk about it.
No, but basically, like, because that is a film that really just touches on exactly what we're talking about in terms of like how destabilizing and like how terrible it is just for kids not to have this information, and it's more the juxtaposition of what we're receiving as messages from the media versus what we're expected to do, and how we're expected to behave. But like basically, I've watched it, and I watched it because of the outrage porn that was being spammed all over my Instagram about it.
Cancel Netflix.
It's just mad. I do not disagree with the marketing, first and foremost.
You do not agree with the marketing?
Yeah, I do not agree.
You do not disagree with the marketing?
She's
like, I love the poster.
Oh my God, no, I do not love the poster. Edit that out, bro.
No, like,
I do.
Netflix, the North American poster was it wasn't even the European poster.
Yeah.
The one that everyone was sharing where it's the out of context scene where they're all in the little booty shorts or whatever.
Yeah.
That was the North American Netflix poster, which
okay,
and as far as I know anyway, and I think the European poster was different, and it's from the original film or whatever.
Right. So I don't agree with that really because of the way, because I don't think it's worth risking getting your art cancelled for some shock factor. I think that picture in particular was a very shock factor picture. Maybe it was in to get people to engage, but I think it definitely risked it getting cancelled.
I think there was a mistake made on the
marketing. A mistake made, yeah. But I think what would have been an incredible poster would have been her in that outfit, like maybe back-to-back split screen against herself in the hijab. And because really,
there we go.
What's so powerful, what's more shocking, about this film or sensationalized is not the sexuality of young girls, of 11-year-old girls. It's the rawness of the juxtaposition between her reality of that she's surrounded with, that she's surrounded by with her friends, and the dancing and watching these music videos and trying to copy them, versus like the really strict Muslim upbringing. And like there's some incredible scenes in that film. There's some things I don't agree with as well, like certain shots, of them dancing, which it does sexualize them, but it's meant to make you uncomfortable. And but there's other scenes which are so theatrical. They're like out of a theater piece where the music is opera, like really severe, like an aria that someone's singing about maybe someone dying in, and they're like skipping over the hill with like bras on over their clothes that they've just bought, and like flinging like confetti, and they're like singing and dancing, and then they're doing all those like poses that are like sexualized, but to this really grim and it's all in slow-mo, and it's so dark.
What I found weird with that film, and the outrage against that was like weird, because people were like, oh, it's disgusting, it sexualizes, blah blah, and like when I understood that the point of the movie was to address the sexualization of young girls, I'm like, so we're against, because people are like, oh, but it's too graphic and blah blah. Oh, but you watched 12 Years a Slave.
You watch those LA dance videos. You condone, you condone pageantry and like really young kids gymnastics and certain things that go on with that. Like,
and then when it comes to like someone making a piece of art to address these things,
everyone's like, no, I don't want to hear it.
And it's like that's like the same as like 12 Years a Slave or Schindler's List and all these things that it's like it's a fictional piece of art, or not fictional, but you know what I mean. The scenes are filmed. It's a piece of art meant to portray the horrors of these things that happened in real life. And now you have a problem. Why? Because for me this is the outrage porn thing, or because everyone else has a problem with it.
Exactly. And I think, actually I read something from the director about it, and she said something like, I wanted the audience to sit like 96 minutes through what it is the reality to be an 11-year-old girl in today's age for 24 hours a day. Like this is their reality all the time. And I think it's very interesting as well because it's French. It's a French film, so there's certain things.
She's Senegalese
French, so there's certain things in it that are really like explicit, like the fighting and the bullying. Oh my god, like I think in a British or maybe even American film they would have just alluded to it, they wouldn't have actually shown it, but at the same time I'm appreciative to be exposed to that kind of level of explicit, like just reality on screen. And like again, it's the juxtaposition, it's the fact that she has her period like when she in a really traumatic way, and like that's foreshadowed by a scene where like the dress she's supposed to wear to her father's wedding, like, and the father's marrying another woman, taking two wives, and that's a whole side plot, which is really like, why is her mother's really depressed and like getting squished by the fact that whatever, but the dress she's supposed to wear starts bleeding from the inside. It's so like fantastical, like and weird. And then when she has a period, her mother says to her, just walks into the room, sits down with her and says, you're a woman now, to this 11-year-old kid. And it's that versus the sexualization. It's that you're a woman now when you're 11 and you've had your period, and like there's just you're getting shamed and told stop dancing like that, stop dressing like that, but then you're not given any other route or any other reason. And I mean, again, my sister's like 10 years younger than me. She got Instagram so young. I saw her using those filters. There's a scene where she puts a filter on where she got loads of makeup. It's like, this is their reality, man. Like we need to get the tools. I mean, it's so mad, because in the lockdown, when there was no work whatsoever and I was really starting to question my life, music, dance, everything, there was a point, because I know I've been so passionate about this stuff for so long, like sex education, that I was like, I'm gonna just I started researching degrees. I started researching like charities I could work for and emailing them, and then that was the day before the whole scandal in the scene broke out. And then I got crushed mentally and I couldn't.
Yeah, that was...
It was such awful timing because I was like, I'm going to be a sex educator.
Yeah. But I think that's why we need more of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah, I think, and it's just crazy to me how, it's such a shameful topic or like, I don't know, even, I don't know, you're saying about masturbation being normal and stuff, but it's like, I don't know, it's like you something like going to the toilet, like people are like, oh yeah, I just need to go for a shit, but like you would never say, oh, I just need to go masturbate to your friends. Do you know what I mean? Like, but why is one okay and one isn't?
Exactly. Well, like female masturbation particularly, or anyone who has female genitalia, like masturbating is also super. Like I remember guys talking about wanking, like in school, and be like, oh, look how far I can jizz. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like so gross. And I didn't even know masturbate. Like, I actually didn't know it was a thing.
Yeah.
Until I was probably like, I'm not going to say how old because it's embarrassing. But
until about 20 minutes ago.
I'm swearing at Luke right now if you can't see. But no, fuck's sake.
She's like, I'm just learning about it now actually. Can you what else is there?
I'm such a waste man. Oh my god.
Yeah,
no, but I know some people like do actually just go out and find this information, but I was like super I had such a closeted childhood. I was like the oldest child. Yeah. Didn't know anything. So yeah, and that's because it's shrouded in shame, or it's literally disappeared. Like it's like it doesn't exist. Yeah. We don't talk about it.
Man, I want to do like fucking podcasts with like, I don't know, some sex expert or something. I know a few. I follow loads of YouTubers and like people who, there's a girl called Hannah Witten who has a podcast called Doing It, and literally I listen to that so avidly because she has all sorts of people on there, like intimacy coordinators from films, like someone who works for a charity, someone who's like a sex worker, or like or does webcamming, or all these different, literally people from all walks of life, and just related to relationships and sex and a bit of disability because she has a disability as well. So it's and especially with us, like in the dance scene, it's like I feel like sex is such a it's crazy the conversations I have, because it's like a lot of people are, I mean, the dance scene is a bit mad, like in the sense that there's a lot of people like sleeping with each other, which is totally fine, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's like it is there's a lot of that, and I think, but at the same time, I know so many women that feel like they can't let anyone know about their sexual activities or who they've slept with or whatever, because they're like, oh well, it's like I'll be seen like this, or it won't be seen as professional, or blah blah blah. Like guys as well, but a lot of women I speak to feel like that, and I think it's such a fucking shame, because it's like, Jesus, like we're in a scene where everybody's like fucking good looking, talented, like, do you know what I mean? Everybody's open, everybody's like, we're artists, we're all expressive, and it's like, like fucking, it's bound to happen. And it's like, why it's so weird that it's like such a catalyst kind of place for
controversy,
like, or for like sex, but then at the same time we can't talk about it, or people feel shamed, or people shame people for having slept with. I don't know. I just think it's mad.
Yeah, it's really rife. I think in our scene in particular, like I feel like we can only work in the places we work in. Do you know what I mean? And try and make better safe spaces in these places. Yeah, I think coming up, especially as a teenager, and in like this, I did this long video on my Insta, like coming up on the scene as a young, like at the time female, like identifying person, it's like it is dangerous. That's why I think a lot of people don't talk about it. It's because you don't know where that you might end up, or if you're particularly young or that as naive as I was, like you just don't you don't feel a sense of control, like, and like and I spoke in that long, like I think it was like 14-minute Instagram video that I did, and within that I talk about how someone asked me out who was like over 30, and how
old are you?
I was 19. Right. And like, and it was a very like quite sexual advance, like in the way that, and this is why it's really interesting in regards to the scene, I mean in regards to dance, and I think things get pushed under the rug a lot, and it's probably in contemporary and ballet as well, do you know what I mean, because of we're bodies. Our work is our bodies,
Yeah.
and we are intimate with each other like all the time. Pre-COVID,
Yeah.
you know, in the club, in the cypher, we're literally getting up on each other's grill, or if you're just like lofting with someone, you're on the floor, like just like, you know, gliding and sliding all around, and it's just like, it is really intimate. And I think there needs to be a recognition of that, and just like, yeah, it's weird. I think also people like calling out other people's bad behavior, like if someone's shaming someone else, why are you doing that? If someone's like someone who you know is like 30 plus is advancing to someone you know, literally, like, because I looked like a baby when I still look like a baby, but I looked like a baby when I was 18. I'm sure people saw that happening, but no one was like, hey dude, what are you doing? Like, why are you hitting on her? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or even spoke to me and said, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I think that's a really nuanced point that is missed, is like, and I'm talking about anything legal. Anything legal that's happening, you might be unsure about, whatever, but just checking in and be like, are you good? And then they're like, yeah, I'm good, or whatever. There's like, okay, cool, like, you know, and like you said, like creating those safe spaces where it's like you can talk about stuff and people feel okay, you know, because it's like, say you at like 18, 19, you might have been really into that guy, for example.
Exactly.
And if you were, and then someone came along and was like, fuck this guy, he's that. And you're like, oh no, like, I actually quite like that.
Yeah, no, just checking
it's
in.
like, yeah, just checking and be like, yo, Saskia, you all right? And then like, yeah, cool, like it's fine, like I don't feel like this or whatever. And it's like, but also conversely, it gives you the opportunity to say, actually, no, I'm not feeling great. I feel a bit of pressure or whatever.
Or it's only really through like the scandals and stuff recently that I've learned that certain people have like a reputation for that. Do you know what I mean? And then it's like, so if people know that, why isn't there some kind of, not like, we shouldn't be witch hunting anyone, do you know what I mean, and persecuting anyone, but just like more just broadening our like, say, when I say we shouldn't be persecuting anyone, obviously if people want to take legal action against other people, that's completely within their right to do so.
No, and I think that what you said about witch hunt is
it's more that, it's more that. But I think making just the safeguarding around these spaces more prevalent and accessible is just what's important. And I mean, just to like shout out people who are doing that, like the Artists Safeguarding and Wellbeing Hub, which is I think headed by Nadia Gardiner, Julia Cheng, and I think Clara's involved in it, like Maren, like quite a few people are involved in that, and me and like Paris I think are going to start volunteering on like the generation below them to like create some resources for the community, and just like, because I will volunteer to do that because I'm really passionate about it. And then the Idea Network as well, which is like what Maren and Rain Crew have started, which is so sick, because I don't know, they had like a race discussion about, and then created like a pamphlet and like about racism in our community, and then they did one about I don't know if they've published it yet, but sexism and sexual misconduct, and I think they're going to be creating like some resources, or because I think the thing is like we need a third body party, like at events and at club nights or whatever, you know, especially if kids are there, just making sure there's a third body party, there's a representative from that organization there who that's a safe space. If you're feeling uncomfortable at that venue or at that event, you can just go to that corner, text this number even. Maybe it's like you can actually just DM the page. Say, hey, I'm at this event right now. I know you guys are representatives here. I feel uncomfortable with this. What can I do? You know, and I think that would be really dope. So I'm excited. I am excited. Although this has come out of a great deal of pain and obviously someone disclosing their suffering, I'm really excited the way in which the community is also coming together around
I think in general, the dance scene needs to get its shit together with regards to everything organizational.
For sure.
And I think when we don't have systems in place for anything, this is the dangerous end of it, where these things start to come out and we realize we have no fucking system to deal with any of this.
For sure.
And nobody knows what the fuck to do because none of us are trained in like these things. Do you know what I mean? I think the other end of it is like the dance scene is horrendous for events. Like no one fucking knows what they're doing with event organization. There's very few people, like, I mean, I'm talking on a general scale, but in general, we have a lot of flaws in the way that we're organized and set up. And for something that's such a turning into, like with BC1 and all these, it's turning into like a big stable kind of thing. We've got fucking breaking in the Olympics, and it's like We're breaking in the Olympics, but we don't have a system for safeguarding.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, how are we here?